Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to 2024 elections. My name is Faraz Patel. I would like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV channel 347. We are moving closer to May the 29th, of course, just over 2 weeks left. And yeah, we are bringing different political parties, different stakeholders from civil society to religious leaders, and so much more to get a feel of how this elections will shape here in South Africa. It is definitely going to be one of the most hotly contested polls. And we've seen a number of new parties entering into the frame. And today my guest is Songezo Zibi, who is the leader of Rise Mzansi. Songezo, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me on tonight.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Songezo, we were talking off-air, campaigning, 2 weeks to go. When you look at, obviously, the 1 year of Rise Mzansi, how would you assess the party so far?
Look, I'd say it's been miraculous because we didn't think that we would qualify for the election in all 9 provinces, firstly, because you start from scratch with absolutely nothing. And we introduced ourselves to the country, and we went to communities all over each of the 9 provinces with our proposition, but also what our politics is about. And we are really delighted that people have given us a very strong mandate to participate in this election. And the reception continues to be really good. And people accept the idea that this is a long journey for us. It's not a once-off for this election and then we stop. We're looking forward to 2026 and to 2029.
So let's talk about, obviously, the aims and ambitions of Rise Mzansi. So a couple of weeks ago on another program I host called Talking Point, I had your national chairperson and Gauteng Premier candidate, Voisa Ramukgopa. And she was, of course, talking about her challenge within the Gauteng province. But provincially, is the mandate an eventual premier position? Or are you looking to have, of course, your members be part of the national legislature and somehow making a difference there?
I think everyone gets into an election with the intention of winning. Our slogan for this election is "We need new leaders."
Yes.
And I think it's going to remain relevant until 2029, effectively. We fielded a premier candidate in Gauteng, in KZN, and in the Western Cape, because we felt that those are the 3 provinces where we stand a reasonable chance of potentially being in a coalition government after the election. And it's also important that we demonstrate to people that we've got the caliber of people, young, fresh leaders with different experiences, who can lead and begin to take over from the current older generation of leaders that are still with us.
And I want to touch on, obviously your slogan saying, we need new leaders. How much of a gap is there in terms of leadership within the country? I ask this because you've got, of course, the elders, and we've got the new leadership, like yourself, that are entering into the frame. How do we strike that balance within that middle so that there can be pure out-and-out leadership for the country and leadership that the country actually deserves?
Look, there is a generational issue between the old leaders, and I think they have contributed a lot to the crisis in which we find ourselves. But the issue is not just about age, it's about what we stand for. I think one of the things that has completely fallen apart in South Africa is any sense of order. And the role of leadership is to introduce order to a potentially chaotic situation without relying on the rules and the laws to help you with that. And I think the sense of lawlessness, that anything goes, is because the people at the top themselves do not adhere to the laws and the norms that should keep not only government, but the rest of the society together. When leaders steal, you really cannot complain about junior civil servants stealing or young people stealing and getting involved in crime and that sort of thing. So we also need a moral and ethical overhaul of leadership in South Africa, not just age.
Songezo, the coalitions, by accounts of the pollings that are going around, it seems quite evident that we are heading into coalition governments. Now, we've seen what has played out in the metros, and there's been a sense of a loss of trust within the residents
Yes.
of
Yes.
we see city of Johannesburg, the merry-go-round in terms of mayors. The same can be said about Ekurhuleni also. And these are two key metros within the Gauteng province. Now, how important is a framework going to be established for the National Assembly? Because the citizens don't want to have a case of every 5 months there's a revolving president.
Look, I mean, this chaos is one of the reasons why some of us decided to enter the political arena. It's just one of the reasons. And that's because the chaos is not because there are lots of political parties. The chaos is because you don't have the caliber of leaders who can work together. Because they put the needs of the voters or citizens at the center of everything they do. What has tended to collapse the coalitions is because one political party feels that they can get another MMC position by grouping with another. And therefore, they're going to break down the coalition and start a new deal with somebody else. And then as soon as another group makes a new offer, then they go back to another arrangement again. That is a problem. And South Africans need to get used to the idea of coalitions because we are entering that phase for the next 2-3 electoral cycles. But we need leaders who are mature, are serious, and are accountable.
And that's where the next question comes in, Songezo, accountability. Because how in a coalition government, how important is accountability between leaders going to be very important? For example, how does Songezo Zibi hold, for example, a John Steenhuisen accountable? Or how does Songezo Zibi hold Cyril Ramaphosa accountable, for example, not delivering on promises that were made 6 months or even 12 months ago?
I think one of the ways in which we can ensure greater accountability is also by making sure that not everybody who's involved in the coalition ends up in the executive, for instance, right? Because you end up overseeing yourself. You're part of the coalition government, and the chairpersons of the parliamentary committees are also coming from the same group that is in coalition. And so they use those portfolio committees to protect one another. Now, we must be innovative in this coming term and say, sure, we will vote for so-and-so from party X to be president. However, we choose to chair the portfolio committees, for instance, that are going to make sure that the people that we've elected are accountable without this conflict of interest where you feel you need to protect your own cabinet colleague because you are together in cabinet. That's just one of the ways we can make sure there's greater accountability.
Songezo, I look at 2019, of course, COPE comes into the party, 2014, the EFF comes. Now 2024, we've got a whole range of new political parties. Yourself, Shiluva, the MK party, so much. What role does the new parties have to play in this elections? I ask this because trying to convince the voter, and of course, we were talking of air, you were in Mtata, and the residents are asking, what can you do for me? So what can Rise Mzansi do for the citizen of South Africa that maybe the older parties, the parties that have been there for long, the ANCs, the DAs, the EFFs, the UDMs, cannot maybe fulfill?
So I think there are three things about Rise Mzansi quickly which set us apart. The first is that we are not a breakaway of any political party. Interestingly, the political parties you mentioned, all of them are a breakaway of one of the established political parties that people are already disgruntled with. They take off the ANC or DA t-shirt, put on a different color t-shirt and say, hey, I'm brand new. I'm going to do differently, right? And that's the politics of disgruntlement within political parties. We need to move away from that. And Rise Mzansi has set itself apart by taking people who love the country but have not been embroiled in these factional politics in political parties. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're not just about the next election. We've set a long-term vision for South Africa, for Rise Mzansi, which says a child born today must have a different life in 20 years' time when they've exited school and they're about to start working. And we've taken an all-of-society approach. The last thing is that we have built our politics on ground-up organizing, on ground-up accountability. And one of the things that will set us apart after this election will be the political party that is most in touch with voters on a regular basis without the vote. Because at the next time people have to turn up at the polls, they will know these guys have been with us. Unlike these guys who disappeared after the last election and only come back after 5 years.
Speaking to the constituency, the importance with regards to that. After the break, I continue my conversation with Songezo Zibi, the leader of Rise Mzansi. Do stay tuned to 2024 elections. Welcome back to 2024 elections. I'm in conversation with Songezo Zibi, the leader of Rise Mzansi. Songezo, the multi-party charter.
Yes.
Of course, you had an opportunity to join the Democratic Alliance and its partners, but you've completely rejected that. Your reasoning, was it based on policies, or was it just based on a case of principle?
It was mostly principle. I mean, the policies almost don't matter, right? Because post-election, you get the number of seats you get, and you get into a discussion with other political parties that had different policies anyway. So that wasn't the issue. Firstly, we got approached at a time when, as a new political organization, no convention yet, no manifesto. And if you go into an arrangement like that, we're really just representing ourselves.
Sure.
You've got no mandate. And you've got no policy positions. We're just looking for roles for ourselves as a leadership. And we felt that that's exactly what is wrong with politics in South Africa. So that was the first reason. The second reason is that the whole formulation of the multi-charter was also formulated to protect the DA's position. In other words, the other political parties cannot compete with the DA where it is possible for them to do so. So that was the second thing. The third thing, we felt that it's a co-opt and neutralize strategy for political parties like ourselves. And we were proven right because the DA has spent more time attacking us than they have attacking the ANC.
I wanted to touch on that because a couple of months ago, in your Western Cape, they Save South Africa campaign, you were one of the parties that came under attack from John Steenhuisen. And of course, I know you responded with regards to that. There's nothing innovative from them, isn't it? Because it just seems to be an attack on political parties, but no real pathway in terms of fixing South Africa. So you've got one side where they criticize other political parties like yourself, but on the other side, there's no real clear path to save South Africa with their own ideals.
That's essentially the problem. I think what they noticed in their polling is that, in particular, white voters were also shifting to Rise Mzansi. And they decided to use these scare tactics to say, we support BEE and therefore we are corrupt, that we are coming to the Western Cape, which means, we don't belong in the Western Cape while it is also in South Africa. And to also use a variety of scare tactics around the land issue and so on, to say that this is a dangerous political party. It became clear to us that they are doing that to protect their base because we've made a very strong non-racial proposition. And South Africans are not stupid.
Sure.
Whether they black or white or any other race, they can see who's got a real good intention and who doesn't. And they started gravitating to us. So no ideas, no track record on non-racialism, and just the general appeal to South African voters.
Songezo, the challenges within the country is quite real. Load shedding, the port problems. But there's one I want to touch on with you because you've got a number of your members are business minded, like yourself. Tebe Investments, of course, with regards to Shell, their reasoning is that they don't value the triple BE firm that they are. Shell, of course, by the looks of it, could be exiting South Africa. How does triple BE still have a place within South Africa? And if so, how do we manage that with these multinationals that want to come invest in South Africa? Because at the end of the day, given 400 years of colonialism and apartheid, it's only fair that black business owners have a chance within the economy.
Look, I mean, every crisis or every problem presents an opportunity in one way or another. I really wouldn't be upset about Shell taking a decision, which they've taken in other countries as well, to divest from the retail side of the business and focus on production and distribution, for instance. That gives us an opportunity to transform the fuel retail space.
Sure.
So, in other words, we must not always complain when companies or any other commercial organization makes a strategic decision to come to South Africa or exit. So I think that's an important thing. What I'm looking for is the new owners of the downstream business, are they going to be diverse, represent South Africa, work just as well or better and service South African customers? If the answer is yes, we are good to go. And Shell can focus on the strategy that they've chosen, number one. The second thing is that I think black economic empowerment needs an overhaul, right? Because, I mean, one of the things we emphasize at Rise Mzansi is that we also need to target problems where they most evident. Millions of South Africans are not even able to qualify for triple BEE, right?
Yes, sure.
Because they don't have the schooling outcomes, they don't have the training outcomes, they can't get a job and so on. That gives us the inequality. That is the first thing. The second thing is that I think it is important to provide real instruments to help black and woman-owned businesses. And by black, I mean every South African who was oppressed and before 1994. And the way we do that is we try and support to have 100% owned businesses, because also this owning 2-3% of a multinational company or a white-owned company, doesn't move the needle. We need to start encouraging innovations, new companies that get listed on the Joburg Stock Exchange, expand into other countries and so on. Then our economy grows and the ownership of that pie begins to reflect South Africa as we know it.
Songezo, I want to move to international affairs. Yes. Obviously, Rise Mzansi backs South Africa's case in the ICJ against Israel for what's currently happening in Gaza. Rise Mzansi had the Week for Palestine that was launched last week. We've seen many political parties, of course, when it comes to the issue. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. That of course, the colors are shown, and Rise Mzansi could have chosen, either one of the space, or actually the other part of what is currently happening in Gaza. Why did Rise Mzansi choose to really show its solidarity for the people of Palestine through its Week for Palestine?
So, I mean, there are two principles at play. It's an in-principle decision, actually. So we're not even choosing sides, as it were. Number one, we've got 5 values at Rise Mzansi. One of those values is solidarity, right? The idea that we leave no one behind. In other words, we can't have people with less access to rights than others. We do that in the South African sense. We do that in the global sense. And Palestinians do not have the right of self-determination right now. They do not have their own state. They do not have a fully sovereign state that can issue passports, travel freely, enjoy the same freedoms that we South Africans can enjoy. The second, it pertains to the Bill of Rights in South Africa. We have said to us in our constitution, the most important aspect of that constitution is the preamble and the Bill of Rights. And wherever we see people's rights being violated, we must speak up and support the protection of people's rights in other parts of the world. That somebody may be Arab or not, Jewish or not, Muslim or Jewish or whatever, real is of secondary importance to us. Wherever there are human beings that need protection from human rights violations, we have to, as a principle, stand up so that it becomes possible to say what happened on October 7th was not acceptable, but what's happening in Gaza is also not acceptable. Saying both doesn't mean you're an unprincipled person. And that's the role, that is the position that we have taken.
Songezo, of course, Hilaal TV is a predominantly Islamic channel, but of course we have many non-Muslims within our compatriots watching the television station. I know there's a lot of Muslims within Rise Mzansi. Irfan Mangera, of course, holds quite a senior position, and he's a seasoned activist from the days of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. The Muslim voter right now, there's a big decision where they would like to go to. I mean, on one part, they've seen the 30 years of the ruling party and there's a non-conviction there, but they're looking at the DA and some of its partners and they're thinking, well, we can't vote on them based on a matter of principle. So if Rise Mzansi comes to them and says, choose us, why choose us?
No, I think because we are a party that tries very hard to be principled. We spoke about the moonshot.
Yes, yeah.
And we said why we're not part of it, and that's got to do with principles rather than any other consideration, which was a path that is much easier. Similarly, with issues relating to human rights in Gaza and elsewhere. In fact, when we stated our support for Palestine Week, for Global Palestine Week.
Sure.
We also mentioned the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Yes.
We also mentioned South Sudan. Why are we doing that? We're not minimizing anything. We are saying we stand in solidarity with abused people all over the world. And I think if we share those kind of values together, then Rise Mzansi is a party to vote for.
I've got 2 minutes, Songezo. We've got 3 ballots that are going to be for voters to choose from. If I were to ask you realistic expectations, Songezo, what are you looking at first nationally and then provincially?
What is possible for us, assuming that we are successful in the rest of the 2 weeks, and as you know, like a week is a very long time in politics, we really think it is possible to get up to 20 seats for Rise Mzansi. I mean, it's a ceiling for us. It would be a really strong start for a new organization. Some of the latest polling that came out about 3 weeks ago saw us at between 3.5% and 5% in
significant
Gauteng,
amount,
which is significant for a party that is just 12 months old. So we're wanting to get a very strong foothold, build a relationship with the South African people between elections, do a damn good job in parliament, and then and legislature, ensure that we are the party that should be trusted with the reins of power in 2026 municipal elections and 2029 provincially and nationally.
Songezo, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV on 2024 elections, and all the best ahead of the polls.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. That's Songezo Zibi, the leader of Rise Mzansi. That's all I have for you here on 2024 elections from myself, Ross Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.